Welcome to the podcast. Be more aggressive. It's something that's said a lot, something that certain kids get told a lot by adults, parents, coaches that want to see something different, that want to see different actions out of them. So a lot of parents, they ask us, how can I help my son or daughter be more aggressive on the court? But just saying be more aggressive, quote unquote, be more aggressive, does that help the situation? Do they even know what it means? What does it mean to you as a parent, as a coach? And why are you saying it? Well, you're probably saying it for a variety of reasons. They're too passive. Maybe they don't shoot when they should. Maybe they don't dribble when they should. Maybe they don't chase rebounds. Maybe they're scared to get trapped, even though they work on drills and have great ball handling. Maybe they're avoiding those situations. Again, kids need to play more on their own because they learn through trial and error. So I want to stress that kids, they need to play more on their own. So I assume that you're not talking about when they're at the park. You're talking about the games that you see. So it could very well be a lack of experience because they don't play that often and they don't play enough. So these games that you're seeing, that you're judging, maybe they still feel very raw. And sometimes maybe your son or daughter has the best form on the team, but for whatever reason, they're passing up shots. So why is it that they're not being aggressive enough? Honestly, the majority of what we hear from parents mainly has to do with offense, which isn't really all that surprising because there's something called a scoreboard, not a defense board. And that's a joke, but it's true. So a lot of parents, maybe some of whom, and I'm not trying to be mean or funny, but maybe some of whom have never actually played basketball, that's what they see first. That's what they understand the most. That's what they clap for. That's what they're used to reading about in the newspapers if anybody reads the newspaper anymore, but maybe that's what they read in the app recap, if that's what your school does. So they understand offense. But to me, defense is equally, if not more important in terms of measuring a player's aggressiveness. And I want to stress that defense is where kids can make a huge and immediate impact on the game. Even if they're not that technically sound from a skills perspective, defense is where they can make an impact. But aggressive is aggressive, whether you're talking about offense or defense. So let's agree that we're talking about the kids that aren't aggressive on either side of the ball. And it's not just the parents that want to see their kids be more aggressive. So we're talking about the parents that have reached out, that have asked us, that pull us aside after a skills clinic or after an academy game, after an AU game. We're not just talking about parents that want to see their kids be more aggressive. Coaches want to see their players be more aggressive too. I've seen very average skilled players who maybe don't have great shooting form. Maybe he or she doesn't understand some of the basics, but they play a lot. And why do you think that is? They play a lot because their coaches feel like they can trust them to play hard. And the key word, there's a couple keywords there, is that they compete. So playing with a motor and competing, those are two things that coaches love. Those are two things that coaches want to see from their players. Those are two things that coaches can trust to know that even when you're going to miss a couple shots, even though you might make a couple mistakes, if you compete and you play with a motor the entire time, they feel like they're going to have a good chance to win because that effort is visible. That effort shows. And coaches want to see that. But there's a fine line between being aggressive and being a jerk. So that's the area where you got to kind of figure that out. How to get them to be aggressive on the court, be aggressive in bounds, be aggressive during the game, but not being a jerk, not tripping people on purpose, not playing dirty, and also not being aggressive just when they're in the grocery store, not being aggressive in math class, figuring out how to draw that line because there is a fine line. But I do want to say that from personal experience, it's much easier to tame a lion than it is to get a sheep to attack. I may or may not have butchered that saying, or I just invented it. I don't know. But it's true. Ask any coach who's been around the game, who's coached a lot of players for a number of years. It's much easier to tame a lion than it is to get a sheep to attack. But let's stick to helping better understand the hows, the whys of getting timid kids to be more aggressive and stop holding back. So we want them to show emotion. We want them to have a motor. We want them to take chances. People in charge, meaning coaches, they want to see players on the floor that go for it. However, I want to be clear that things that make a great player don't always make a great person, and vice versa, because you can't be a jerk all the time. You can't be aggressive all the time. You have to figure out the time and the place and then let it all out on the court. So you need to have one approach for inbounds and another for out of bounds. Two different approaches. This is easier said than done though, especially with young players. Because if you're a good parent, and let's assume that you are, you've been telling them their entire lives to wait in line, stay still, don't run around the pool. No, you can't climb that. Let the other kids have a turn too. Put that down. That's dangerous, which sometimes is obviously necessary. But we've given our kids all kinds of instructions to make them passive, to make them easier to deal with. It's much easier to hand them an iPad to get them to be quiet than it is to listen to the noise and the raucous wrestling that will take place if you leave kids alone and let them play with each other and let them play outside with other kids. And most kids are born selfish animals. I'm not sure if that's the politically correct term. It's definitely not the proper medical terminology. But most kids, they're born selfish animals. And I have 4 of them, so I have some experience. But they all have their own unique personalities and mental makeup, how they're wired, how they tick, how they think. We can talk about nature versus nurture, but their nature is selfish. They need to breathe, they need to eat, they need to sleep, they want what's in front of them. They're selfish animals. And sometimes we squeeze that out of them far too young to make them conform, which makes them passive, which in turn takes away their instinctive aggressiveness that we're saying we want to see from them on the court. So they learn to fit into society with the rules and customs because of us, which is necessary, but most likely doesn't always help them with sports, obviously, right? Being polite is great for life, but not for sports. Think about that. Holding the door open for somebody, that's something that we teach kids, right? But holding the door open for somebody at a restaurant, imagine you were starving and they only had 1 slice of pizza left. And you knew it. They made an announcement. 1 slice of pizza left. So you go up to the door, you're starving, there's people behind you. Would you still open the door for somebody else? Or would you race in there to get it first? And that's how sports work sometimes. The aggressive person, the aggressive player, that's who gets the loose ball. And I'm sure you've noticed that some kids, they just go out there and leave it all on the floor every single play. Why? They just go for it. Surely there's a physical component in which it's easier or more likely for bigger, stronger, more mature players to be aggressive. That's true. But there's some little guys and girls who go out there and play crazy hard. So if it's not physical, or if we can remove that variable from the discussion, it's mental or psychological, however we want to phrase it. So how can you get your son or daughter to stop playing timid or scared? We have to assume, for the sake of this discussion, we have to assume that they actually have some ability. I'm trusting you on that. So we're saying that they do have some skills, they know how to play basketball. We're going to assume that they actually have some ability. If we're entering into this next part, they have to be able to shoot, dribble, pass, defend. If we're entering into this next part. Otherwise, I highly suggest that you focus more on building their skills first. And there's a small percentage of parents out there that just completely don't realize that their son or daughter might not be as good as they think they are, or they're pretending that they are. I don't know. But there are some parents, a small percentage, but there are some parents out there that just, they see things with a different pair of glasses. We'll call them parent glasses. And they don't realize how good or bad their son or daughter is. But we're talking to everybody else. So if your son or daughter, if they are skilled, why are they playing timid? Are they worried about what other people think? Are they worried about what you think? Are they worried about what their coach thinks or what their teammates think? That's a lot of thinking. But is that what's holding them back? Because that's a valid part of learning the dynamics of peer pressures and team dynamics. As adults, we forget that sometimes. The pull to conform and fit in, it's an extremely powerful thing. So in their young minds, they're not necessarily old or wise or experienced enough to simply not care what people think. That's something that we learn over time. And that's a skill that maybe you as an adult learned from a lot of experience, but they haven't learned that yet. So this plays a role. But most of the time, it's because they're afraid of something. Think about that for a second. They're afraid. But of what? Getting yelled at? Maybe. Teammates being mad at them? Maybe. Of making mistakes? That's most likely the main culprit. And if your kid can't quite verbalize that to you, I bet that's the main one. Because they're trying to be perfect, which does not exist. Think about everything sports related in their environment. Constant highlights on TV or social media, all successful plays. What is it like when you guys watch games together? Basketball, football, any sport. You're probably, like most fans, questioning the player's choices or saying somebody sucks or is stupid because they missed a shot or lost the ball. Maybe you don't want to admit it, but there's a lot of couch quarterbacks out there, and that's human nature. But they're around that. They're used to seeing that. They're used to hearing that. So stuff like that, it sticks with them. So have you ever tried being extra positive, especially when you're watching games together, so they can hear, see, experience you saying things like, that was a good try. Almost, they'll get it next time. That was a good shot, even though he missed. Make them realize that failure, quote unquote failure is a part of taking chances. It's a part of it. You can't remove it. And if you don't try, you'll never have success. Imagine never shooting a shot in a game. How many are you going to make? Zero. Now say the same thing about a season. Zero. Now let's talk about muscle memory. Let's talk about dribbling. If you never try to dribble or bring the ball up, you'll never get used to it. You'll never develop experience, which means that when that moment comes and your team needs you, you'll be scared. You'll be terrified to do it because it's going to feel new, awkward, uncomfortable. So if we can agree that to an extent it's related to fear of failure, what's holding your son or daughter back, them not being aggressive, if we can agree it's related to fear of failure, we remove physical maturity as an advantage, we removed skills, we removed basketball IQ, so it's absolutely psychological. And if that's the case, they need to know that they're never, ever, they're never going to be perfect. So they should stop trying because trying to be perfect can be crippling and it actually makes you play much worse. So as a parent, you obviously want them around great mentors and leaders. You want to surround them with really good positive coaching. Not so happy, fun time that it's a gimmick and players get a balloon animal and a participation trophy for missing a free throw. That's not what I'm saying at all. But you want them around really good positive coaching. You want them around really good people that care about building them up for the future so they love the game and continue to work and improve. And although there's tons of really good people, tons of really good coaches out there, finding what your son or daughter needs sometimes is easier said than done because a lot of coaches and programs are so focused on winning at the youth levels that they lose sight of everything else. Winning is important, and players need to learn how to want to win. I'm 100% on board with that. We need to make sure that they learn the joys of winning, but it shouldn't be the end all be all. And because winning at all costs is sadly the sole focus of some coaches and programs, a group of fourth grade girls or boys doesn't allow some kids on the team to even get on the court, or they play zone the whole game to take advantage of the fact that most kids that age don't yet have the strength to skip the ball to the other side of the court to find the openings, or even holds the ball for the last few minutes of games because there's no shot clock. I already did an episode on that topic, so if you haven't heard it, you should definitely check that one out. But imagine that. They're so focused on winning that they're trying to find advantages and shortcuts, including holding the ball, playing zone the entire time, not playing certain players, because all they care about is winning. I know a local youth program director who I think is a smart man. He once told me that he cares less about how many tournament championships their youth teams win now, because the most important thing is that they provide opportunities for kids, for as many as possible, to play, to improve, to get better, to get experience, so they love it, so that they're good enough to win when they're in high school. Because for him, that's when it really matters. And without saying the name of the program, it's worked. They've won a lot, and it continues to work. So clearly, that's a smart way of doing things. So you want to make sure your son or daughter's around great coaches that do it for the right reasons. But honestly, you can't always pick who's going to coach your son or daughter, right? Unless you're willing to sell your house and move just so your sixth grader can play for better coach or program for the 3 months of the school season. That doesn't make sense. So what do you do? In addition to making sure they're getting great skill work and doing clinics, going to camps. I know kids don't go to camps that much anymore, but back in the day, kids used to go to basketball camps where they actually worked on things and they learned. For whatever reason, those have gone away because people are so focused on quote unquote exposure and rankings for kids these days. But let's assume that you're helping them by providing your son or daughter opportunities to learn by doing skill work at clinics, private training from really good coaches, which can be extremely beneficial, not only from a physical standpoint in building their skills, but from a mental standpoint. Because players need to hear instructions, they need to hear advice from a source other than their parents sometimes, right? We've all been there when somebody else tells our kids something that we've said, I don't know, hundreds of times, but somebody else tells them, and all of a sudden they think that person's a genius. And that's just the way it works. There's a famous Mark Twain quote: "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant, I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much the old man had learned in 7 years." Which is shockingly true for the way that most kids go through that adolescent period where they need to hear instructions from somebody other than their mom or dad. So put your kids in situations where they're around really good people that teach, that care, that help guide them to reach their potential. But let's assume that your kids do listen to you, at least a little bit. What advice should you give them? Should you tell them don't listen to your coach when the coach is yelling or mean or angry or telling them not to do something? Should you tell them don't listen to your coach? Is that healthy? Is that productive? Should those words ever come out of your mouth? It's like saying don't listen to your boss, which will get them fired someday in the real world, right? So that's not good. However, you can remind them that their coaches are human and that they also make mistakes. But don't tell them to blatantly disrespect or not listen to their coach. That's the wrong message. Would you want other parents to tell their kids that about you if you're volunteering your time and coaching a group of kids? No, absolutely not. Remind them that it's okay to make mistakes. Make that a constant teaching point. Say it in some way, shape, or form over and over and over to them. And then you have to actually support that with your own words and actions leading up to the game, during the game, after the game. Remind them it's okay to make mistakes, but mainly after the game. Try to leave them alone as much as possible during the game so they can focus on the actual game and just listen to their coaches, listen to their teammates. If you're not the coach, do the best you can, please, on behalf of coaches worldwide. Don't coach them from the stands. Don't coach them during the game. Don't have them looking at you on the sideline. Let them learn to focus. Talk to them after the game. Something else that can really help them: show them the stats of whoever their favorite players are. Ask them, hey, buddy, who do you think is the best player in the NBA right now? Who's your favorite player in the WNBA? Ask them, see what they say. And then show them their mistakes, show them their missed shots. Steph Curry, for example, arguably the best shooter ever. Would anybody even argue that somebody's better than him? He has the second most missed threes ever, ever, and will probably be number one someday, soon. So statistically speaking, he misses more shots than he makes. Think about that. Not just for you to relay this information to your son or daughter. Think about that. Steph Curry, best shooter ever. He misses more shots than he makes. Think about all those misses. So every time your son or daughter has ever seen Steph Curry make a three, some highlight reel, Instagram, TikTok, who knows what, he's missed a three or more for every one that he's made. Caitlin Clark, another amazing player that seemingly single-handedly, she didn't do it alone, but the media kind of makes it feel like that sometimes, single-handedly raised awareness and interest in the WNBA. She missed 233 threes last season in just 40 games. So she made 34%, but she missed 233. She missed almost 6 threes per game. And to top it all off, we've all seen her great passes, some no looks, pitching it ahead, kicking it out, finding open teammates. She had 223 turnovers last season. That's not to impress you. That's not to leave an impression just on you. That's for you to relay that information to your son or daughter so they know that the best in the world, the best of the best, they're not perfect and they make tons of mistakes and they miss shots all the time. So it's okay for your son or daughter to miss them too. It's okay when they have a turnover here and there. And then, and you need to be careful and tactful when you do this, and probably alone, probably in the confines of the four walls of your own house, find a way to carefully help them compare themselves to some of their better teammates and ask them if their teammates are perfect. Ask them, does the best player in your team make every single shot? For sure, the answer is no. And that's not to be mean. It's for them to realize it's okay to take chances. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to miss shots. Help them learn to trust themselves. And it starts with you supporting them, not just with your words, but with your actions. We sometimes forget that our body language speaks way louder than words. So just like the famous saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? What type of message are we sending them if we say one thing And then they look in the crowd to see their mom or dad doing a face palm, shaking their head in disgust. What type of message does that send? That's clearly a mixed signal at its finest. So, assuming you're a good parent and you simply want what's best for your kid, your expectation isn't that they're going to be the NBA's or WNBA's #1 draft pick next week, even though they're only in 7th grade, right? You're not doing this for your own ego, for your pride. We're assuming that. We're assuming that you're doing this for the right reasons. You want your son or daughter to have an amazing experience, to improve, to get better, to have fun, to find joy playing sports. So put on your best Sigmund Freud hat and discover the best way to get them to not be afraid of making mistakes. Make the game fun. Take away excess pressure and stress. Focus on the positives. There's always going to be some kids better than others, but overall, the ones who take more risks, they get more rewards. You have to take chances. And that's a valuable lesson to learn in life, which is what makes youth sports so valuable in the realm of developing young men and women. Youth sports is great at developing these kids into successful adults. So help them remove the fear and remind them that they don't have to say please and thank you before and after they steal the ball from their opponent. Take chances. Be less polite. Just go for it. Don't worry about what other people think. That should be your message. If this helped you, please do us a favor and forward this to another parent or coach. Send it to somebody in your friend group if you think it can help them too. Obviously, we also request that you like the episode, subscribe to our channel, because all of that, it helps us reach more people and grow our audience. And on top of that, and if you think that this would help your son or daughter, and they're mature enough to process the information in this episode, maybe listen to it together. There might be some nuggets of wisdom that help them. There might be something I said that makes them laugh or helps them realize how silly it is to hold back. And as you're listening, pause from time to time. Dive in deeper to certain areas. I'm assuming that because you listened all the way through, you're willing to do whatever it takes to help them, which is beautiful, which is what parents should do. And based on the number of times our coaches heard from parents about this being an issue, we know that you want to help them succeed. And we want to help too. If you need any extra help or guidance, send us a message. Come get some.